Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today with some pretty high-level source material. We've got interviews, diplomatic records, recent talks with Pakistani leadership.
All zeroing in on one relationship, China and Pakistan. It's been 71 years now.
Exactly. And it's this remarkably stable partnership, isn't it? Especially given, well, everything else going on in the region.
That's the core question, yeah.
Yeah.
It's famously called the Iron Brotherhood, Batai in Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
It has this feeling of rock-solid reliability. How does it stay so stable, despite all the political shifts inside Pakistan, not to mention global changes?
That's what we're here to unpack. Our mission today is to quickly synthesize the history, the strategic thinking behind it, and the big economic pieces holding it together.
And crucially, contrasting it, putting it side by side with Pakistan's relationship with the U.S., which is, well, let's just say it's complicated, often frustrating for Pakistan, based on the sources.
A tale of two very different partnerships.
Yeah.
So let's start with that bedrock stability you mentioned.
Okay. The sources are really clear on this. It's not just diplomatic niceties. Imran Khan, when he was PM, he kept calling it an all-weather strategic partnership.
That all-weather phrase seems key. For you listening, the point here is that it doesn't really matter which political party is in charge in Islamabad.
Right. The underlying policy, the friendly stance towards China, it just stays. It's consistent.
And that consistency translates into serious diplomatic loyalty. Pakistan backs China firmly on Beijing's core interests.
Yeah, pretty much across the board. You know, sensitive issues like Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan, the South China Sea, Pakistan's position is consistently aligned with China's.
The history here really shows why they call it iron, doesn't it? I was struck by the UN example back in 1962.
Oh, yeah. Pakistan was crucial. They actively pushed for restoring New China's legitimate seat at the UN.
And this is when the U.S. was leaning hard on its allies not to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Pakistan took a real strategic risk there. They backed Beijing when China really needed that international recognition. That builds a kind of trust, you know, that lasts.
And it wasn't just at the UN globally. They were also acting as advocates within the Islamic world, right?
Yes, that's a fascinating part. Within the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, for about a decade, the 90s into the early 2000s, Pakistani diplomats were often the ones speaking up at the UN Human Rights Commission, defending China against Western criticisms.
Basically saying, look, we're an Islamic country, China isn't, but trust us, they're friends of the Islamic world. That's quite the statement.
It absolutely is. They use their own identity, their own standing to, well, shield their ally.
And then there's the most famous bit of history, the Kissinger visit.
Right, the channel. 1971, Pakistan played that indispensable role, arranging Kissinger's secret trip to China.
Which opened the door for Nixon, made Pakistan a key go-between when the U.S. and China weren't even talking.
It really cemented their unique position for a while there.
Okay, so if they were this trusted friend, this bridge, why didn't that same kind of all-weather relationship develop with the United States? Why is the contrast so stark?
I think it comes down to Pakistan's core strategic problem, the absolute foundation of their foreign policy since independence.
India.
It's the fear of India, the perceived threat, the power imbalance, the history there. India initially not even recognizing Pakistan's legitimacy. That drives almost everything.
So they need a counterbalance.
They desperately need it. And look at the map, too. Pakistan's quite narrow geographically, so having friendly neighbors, China, Iran, Afghanistan, is vital for what they call strategic depth.
Right, so they don't feel encircled by India.
Exactly. They need stable borders, friendly faces around them.
So stability, counterbalance, these are the non-negotiables. Did the U.S. just miss this?
Well, they didn't prioritize it the way Pakistan did. Pakistan joined 2 U.S. military alliances back in '55, specifically hoping for support against India.
Okay.
But they were really disappointed. The U.S. kept saying, no, these alliances are about the Soviets, about Cold War containment. They explicitly told Pakistan not to use U.S. weapons against India.
Wow. So a fundamental disconnect right from the start. The U.S. wanted one thing, Pakistan needed something completely different.
It felt like a betrayal from Pakistan's perspective. And then came 1965, the India-Pakistan War.
And the U.S. imposed an arms embargo.
On both sides, yes.
Yeah.
But India had Soviet backing. They were okay. Pakistan, relying heavily on U.S. gear, they were suddenly cut off, abandoned, essentially.
That must have been a brutal lesson in reliance.
A defining one. It cemented the idea that the U.S. was, well, a fair-weather friend, unreliable when things got tough. And right around that same time, between '62 and '65,
China comes into the picture more strongly.
dramatically so. The 1962 Sino-Indian border conflict, it showed Pakistan two things. China could stand up to India, and crucially it would. It had the capability and the political will.
So that contrast became crystal clear. China looked reliable where the U.S. didn't.
Precisely. And that feeling of being used, only when convenient for the U.S., that's exactly what Imran Khan talks about in the source material we looked at.
Yeah, his critique was quite sharp. He said the U.S. treats Pakistan like a friend only when needed.
Against the Soviets in Afghanistan, then after 9/11.
And then,
when the U.S. felt Pakistan wasn't useful anymore, like after the Soviets left Afghanistan, sanctions, and then maybe the worst part for them, after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan.
they blamed Pakistan for the failure.
According to Khan, yes.
Yeah.
He said the U.S. blamed its defeat on Pakistan. It really fuels that popular feeling he mentioned.
The idea that anytime you trust the U.S., you are choosing to be abandoned, that's stark.
It is. And it explains so much about why the Chinese commitment, that all-weather promise, is so incredibly valuable to Pakistan.
Okay, so strategy and history lay the groundwork. What about the economic side? What keeps this partnership humming financially?
Well, that's where the big money comes in. Massive infrastructure investment.
We're talking CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor.
Exactly. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, it's the absolute flagship project of China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's this huge 3,000-kilometer corridor.
Stretching all the way from Kashgar up in China's Xinjiang region.
Right down to Gwadar Port, the deep water port on the Arabian Sea in Pakistan.
And it's not just one road, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. It's a whole network. We're talking railways, highways, pipelines for oil and gas, huge power plants, hydro, thermal fiber optic cables, port upgrades. It's designed to fundamentally transform Pakistan's infrastructure.
So what's the big strategic win for each side?
For Pakistan, it's obvious. A massive injection of capital, infrastructure development, jobs, the hope of economic stabilization and growth.
Things they desperately need.
Absolutely. For China, the geoeconomic logic is also really powerful. CPEC gives them a land route to the Indian Ocean.
A crucial alternative to the sea lanes, especially the Strait of Malacca.
Exactly. If you picture the map, Malacca is that narrow choke point where so much global trade, especially energy, has to pass. CPEC potentially lets China bypass that vulnerability.
And it shortens the distance considerably, right?
By thousands of kilometers. Roughly 5,000 to 6,000 kilometers saved compared to going around through the strait. That's a huge saving in time and cost, especially for energy imports from the Middle East.
And the vision doesn't stop at Gwadar, does it?
No. The plan, or at least the stated ambition in the sources, is for CPEC to eventually extend northwards, linking up with Afghanistan and Central Asia.
Turning it into a real Eurasian land bridge.
That's the grand strategic vision, yes.
Okay, but given Pakistan's history of, let's say, political turbulence, changes in civilian government, what guarantees that this decades-long, multi-billion-dollar project actually stays on track?
Well, that brings us to the third pillar, the military.
The Pakistani military.
Yes. The relationship between the Chinese and Pakistani armed forces is deep, it's close, and it goes way back to 1956. And this is critical because, as you know, the military in Pakistan holds significant political sway, constant influence.
We often hear about military interventions, but the sources suggested many Pakistanis see the army almost as a guarantor. A conscience and backbone, I think was the phrase.
However you interpret its role, the fact is its enduring influence means that core foreign policy orientations, especially towards China, tend to remain stable.
So even if the prime minister changes, the military ensures the China relationship and projects like CPEC remain a priority.
That's the assessment. It provides a level of continuity and predictability that Beijing clearly values for its long-term investments. China knows its partner, fundamentally, remains constant.
Shifting slightly, Imran Khan also mentioned Pakistan wanting to learn from China's development model. What was he pointing to?
He focused on China's emphasis on economic security first and policies aimed directly at improving people's livelihoods. People-centered was the term used.
Which makes sense given Pakistan's own economic struggles.
Yeah. Pakistan faces huge challenges. Chronic instability, internal divisions, political infighting. It makes sustained economic focus difficult.
Yeah.
The economy is heavily reliant on agriculture and services, not much manufacturing.
And low per capita GDP? Below $1,400, I think you said?
That's right. So CPEC isn't just about concrete and steel. It's also meant to tackle these deeper issues. There's investment in industrial parks, special economic zones.
Trying to build a manufacturing base.
And crucially, the sources mention Chinese companies actively involved in training Pakistani workers trying to build up the skilled labor force, the engineers, that you need for modern industry. It's development assistance tied directly to the strategic project.
Let's pivot to the present day, the contemporary situation. Pakistan is clearly deeply tied to China. Does that create risks? Anything highlighted in the sources for listeners to think about?
Well, the risk isn't really abandonment, like with the U.S. potentially. Maybe it's the opposite, over-reliance. But the sources actually show Pakistan trying to navigate this, trying to maintain some balance.
How so?
Look at the engagement with Russia recently. It suggests Pakistan wants to keep its options open, pursue a more independent, maybe non-aligned foreign policy path where it can.
Which brings us to that Moscow visit, February 24th. That certainly got attention.
It was a very deliberate signal. Imran Khan meeting Putin in Moscow on the day Russia launched its military operation in Ukraine.
Despite U.S. pressure not to go.
Explicit pressure, yes. The talks were reportedly about energy deals, bilateral stuff, but the timing was clearly symbolic.
It signals a strengthening of Pakistan-Russia ties. Maybe as a hedge, especially seeing India move closer to the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy?
It looks like part of that balancing act, yes. Trying not to be solely dependent on any single great power. And look at how Pakistan voted, or rather didn't vote, at the UN on Ukraine.
They abstained, along with quite a few other non-Western countries.
Right. India, many others, BRICS members, Iran, Turkey. It signals a shared reluctance to just fall into line with the Western narrative, a rejection of being forced back into clear Cold War-style blocks.
And the sources mention think tanks across the region.
Yeah, in what they're calling Eurasia, China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, talking about solidarity. Pushing back against what they see as Western pressure, citing shared grievances like xenophobia, Russophobia, Islamophobia.
A push for multipolarity, basically.
It seems that way. But this complex environment is also dangerous, and the source material brings that home with that Indian missile incident back in March.
Right, tell us about that again. An Indian missile landed inside Pakistan.
Deep inside, yes. India called it an accident, an operational failure during routine maintenance, I believe.
But Pakistan wasn't convinced.
Not at all. They demanded answers, raised serious concerns. They viewed it with extreme suspicion.
Was it seen as just a dangerous mistake or something more?
The speculation mentioned in the sources went two ways. One, was it a deliberate, disguised show of force, maybe timed to coincide with Pakistan receiving new fighter jets jointly produced with China? Or, maybe even more worrying, was it proof of a really unstable command and control system for a potentially nuclear-capable missile? Either way, accidental launch or deliberate provocation.
It just highlights the underlying tension with India hasn't gone away.
Not at all. And it reinforces why that reliable, all-weather relationship with China, the strategic backstop, remains absolutely essential for Pakistan.
Okay. So, wrapping up this deep dive, it seems clear the China-Pakistan bond isn't just rhetoric. It's a strategic necessity, born out of history, proven by decades of support, and now cemented by massive projects like CPEC.
Absolutely. It's built on that shared perception of threat, primarily from India, Pakistan, and maybe a shared vision for a different kind of regional order.
And while Pakistan definitely faces enormous internal hurdles, political instability, economic woes, security challenges, the sheer stability of the relationship with China acts as a kind of anchor.
It really does seem to transcend the usual political ups and downs because those core strategic and economic interests align so strongly and for the long term.
So the final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Both Beijing and Islamabad talk about CPEC, not just connecting their two countries, but becoming this vital Eurasian land bridge, linking Central Asia, linking Afghanistan into the global economy.
That's the grand vision. But given the ongoing geopolitical friction we've talked about and the real security challenges Pakistan still faces within its borders, especially along the CPEC route, how fast can the Iron Brotherhood actually overcome those hurdles? How quickly can they stabilize and expand CPEC to make that grand vision a reality?
That really is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer will shape a huge part of Asia's future.